let's pause that. Okay, some technical difficulties, but what is Copilot Chat? Copilot Chat is Microsoft's AI-powered assistant built into Microsoft 365. It's designed to help you work smarter by combining the power of large language models with your organization's data securely and in real time. Whether you're drafting emails, analyzing data, or catching up on meetings, Copilot Chat helps you get more done and faster. It understands that natural language, so you can ask questions like summarize my last meeting with sales teams or draft a follow-up email to the clients based on the document you've attached and provided. Let's pass it off to Shahab. We're going to go through our agenda for the rest of our session today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Victoria, for that introduction. So just from an agenda perspective, the focus today is primarily around Copilot Chat. And we'll be talking about real practical elements that you can leverage as part of enabling Copilot Chat for your organization. We are at a bit of an inflection point around Copilot Chat. So Copilot Chat, essentially since the start of the year, has been included as part of your Microsoft 365 licensing, but it is starting pretty much now. So some of your tenants might already see it. It is also going to be available in the applications per se. So things like Word, PowerPoint, Outlook. So we'll be talking about the licensing pieces. We'll be talking about the security and privacy piece, because I think that comes up a lot. And then we'll be talking about some of those minor actual practical applications in terms of how you can actually make changes in your environment to enable Copilot Chat. And then the last piece is in terms of how we go about the adoption piece. So we will go fairly deep, but there are always more details which you won't be able to cover as part of this presentation, right? So let's just dive into it. So first and foremost, I think Victoria did a really good job of talking about the M365 Copilot Chat. And it's actually really key when you understand what's happening in the workplace, right? So everyone is already using AI at work. That's not something that's up for debate. Even if you feel that no one's using AI, I can say with quite a massive degree of confidence that your network already has a bunch of AI traffic on it. You might not be seeing it directly because of the tool sets, but that is definitely happening. And the problematic part of that is that second number, right? So most of the people who are using it are actually not using the work tool set. They're not using the mandated AI tool set, but are actually using their own private tool set, right? And so that is where the Copilot Chat kind of comes into it, right? Because Copilot Chat is built explicitly for work. It's the Microsoft implementation of GPT-4o. It's almost always an n-half piece. So once ChatGPT kind of goes to the next one, Microsoft does a rigorous check around the responsible AI element before kind of releasing it to the general populace. The pieces that I think that are key here that are maybe not mentioned in this slide is the fact that, yes, it's the Copilot Chat piece that is the 4.0 piece, but what it's doing is it's giving your organizations an immediate and compliant alternative to consumer AI tools, right? So there are quite a lot of consumer AI tools. You'll have that as a replacement. Then from employees getting that access is significant, but the fact that that IT also retains some sort of control over AI, right? And you don't need to go through additional subscription commitments to get that control and that functionality. And then the last piece is that it's that enterprise-grade security piece, it's the compliance piece, but then also around the agents piece, right? So Copilot Chat is then effectively allowing organizations to experiment, to scale, to validate AI use cases in AI's impact in the organization, right? So there are quite a few elements that kind of Copilot Chat will enable you to do without you actually having to kind of spend significantly, right? Now, where can you access Copilot? The Copilot Chat piece is available to you in the Edge browser. It's available to you on the app. It's available to you, so Teams app and Outlook app. It may be visible to you, some of you folks already For some, it's going to get rolled out in the next month or so, right? And then effectively, it's the Microsoft mobile app as well, right? So there's quite a lot of different ways where your users can kind of access Copilot Chat and how they can kind of make use of it. Right? Now, we've talked about the Copilot Chat piece. We've talked about some of those elements. What does it mean from a licensing piece, right? So everybody gets Copilot Chat, but what does it mean explicitly when we say everybody? So if you have a user with an Entra account that stands for any of these licenses, and like I can't think of many different Microsoft licenses that are outside this list, you are eligible, your users are eligible for getting that Entra account. The only exception that I've kind of noted here is that if you have someone who's under 18, that's something that you'll need to adjust the user profile for before you can kind of give them the access. Right? But apart from that, everyone out there gets Copilot Chat. Right? And then we've been talking about the Copilot Chat piece, but it is right next door to its paid cousin, which is Microsoft 365 Copilot. And Microsoft doesn't make it easy for us to make that distinction from a naming perspective. So the discussion today, the thing that we've been talking about is the Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. That is the free version plus consumption pieces. But this contrasts in quite a big way with the Microsoft 365 Copilot, right? And there are three different elements that we'll be covering. So there's stuff that is already included. There's stuff that you can pay for as you go. And there's things that are coming soon, right? So that chat element, all of that is included with the Copilot Chat piece, except one key element, which is that ingestion of your environment through Microsoft Graph, right? So those Microsoft Graph connectors piece, those are not, that's not something that's done through Copilot Chat. For that, you will need that license. But what you can do is, on a case-by-case basis, you can do file uploads. So if you want to provide contextual elements to Copilot, you can go ahead and upload a file and kind of work off that, right? From an agent's perspective, you can go ahead and use agents in your work data piece, but you will need to pay from them on a metered basis, right? So these can be pay-as-you-go model or through a message pack that you kind of purchase beforehand, right? And then this element that we've been talking about, like I said, is coming soon. So if you have previously, the only way for you to access Copilot in things like Teams or Outlook or in Word was through the Microsoft 365 Copilot. That is effectively changing as we speak, and Copilot Chat will be now available in all of these applications, right? And then the last piece, I think, which is key, is in terms of that enterprise data protection that is available across both Microsoft 365 Copilot and the Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat, the IT management controls, some of those that we'll talk about today, the agent management, again, we'll talk about some of that today. All of those elements are kind of included, right? The Microsoft 365 Copilot, from a licensing perspective, is now a lot more rich than the Copilot Chat piece. So if you were looking at some of those SharePoint advanced management controls, they are now included at no additional cost as part of your Microsoft 365 Copilot license. So $30 per user per month, US. SharePoint Advanced Management, that is already included. Copilot Analytics, so this is what was previously known as Viva Insights. All of those elements, and there's a lot of work that's kind of gone on there. All of those are also included as part of Microsoft 365 Copilot. They are not part of your Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. So all of those pre-built analytics and stuff like that. Even in your general usage, there are certain limitations that are placed on Copilot Chat that you will not see on Microsoft 365 Copilot. So the number of files, the size of each file, they have certain limits as you're kind of uploading them to the platform. That is also a slight difference that you'll see between the Copilot Chat and the Microsoft 365 Copilot. But from a user perspective, from an IT warden perspective, this is amazing because I can go ahead and without any cost kind of roll out Copilot Chat, see its usage, see its adoption, see the impression that my users get from AI, and then make that decision in terms of which group of users or which particular business department needs that Microsoft 365 Copilot piece, the paid piece, whereas other folks can stay on the Copilot Chat piece. Right? So we've kind of talked a little bit in terms of those elements. I'll hand it back to Victoria to kind of show us another video around the privacy and security piece, and then I'll take it back. Over to you, Victoria.
Hey, just sent you the secret sauce recipe. Gonna need a gluten-free version before you leave. Thanks, bye.
It's all good. Using Copilot.
Victoria, you're on mute.
Always happens. Thank you, Shahab. So let's talk privacy and security in Copilot Chat. Because trust is foundational to everything we do, Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat is built on a security-first architecture that ensures your data stays protected, private, and compliant by design first. First, Copilot Chat is grounded in Microsoft's enterprise-grade security, compliance, and privacy controls. That means it respects data boundaries. It only surfaces information that a user already has access to through Microsoft 365. If you can't access a file or email, neither can Copilot. Second, all interactions with Copilot Chat are governed by Microsoft's responsible AI principles. Prompts, responses, and data are not used to train and the underlying modules, so your business conversation stays confidential, just like our little burger guy. So third, Copilot Chat is integrated with Microsoft Purview for compliance as well. That means features like data loss prevention, e-discovery, audit logging, and information protection all extend to Copilot as well. You can apply the same policies you already have across Microsoft 365. And finally, IT admins have full control with Copilot Studio. With Copilot Studio, you can manage access across agents, monitor usage, and enforce governance policies, ensuring Copilot Chat aligns with your organization's risk posture. In short, Copilot Chat is not just smart, it's secure, compliant, and ready to go. Off to you, Shahab.
Awesome. Victoria, do you just want to move the slides across? Awesome. Okay. All right. So let's just so thank you for that, Victoria, and that kind of sets us up really nicely in terms of looking at that backend architecture, right? And I'll go through some of that nomenclature, which I think is significant, right? So prompt is anything that we use to kind of interact with Copilot. It could be something that's pre-written, it could be something that we're writing. The orchestrator that is being used for Copilot Chat is the same as Microsoft 365 Copilot to kind of process your prompts and responses. And the responsible AI engine is also the same behind the scenes. The next piece is the grounding piece, right? So everything that we kind of reach out for goes through a web grounding piece. You can turn it off if you want, but what it's doing is it's effectively sending these web search queries based on the prompt to Bing and to provide relevant information, right? And there aren't any sort of tenant or user identifiers that are being sent out as part of that web search query. And then there are additional kind of, I would say, protections that kind of Microsoft puts in place when they kind of sent out to Bing, right? Then large language models. So again, they are being sent out to GPT 4.0. Having said that, it is not necessary that Microsoft will use only one LLM at the backend. It might use more than one. It might use multiple models to kind of generate a response, right? So it's supposed to be one GPT 4.0, but there might be different iterations of it, different implementations of it that might be used. And then before a response gets back to the user, both the prompt and that response are logged and stored inside your tenant. So if you actually wanted to audit it, you can through e-discovery. So everything is kind of maintained. And then the last piece is that response piece is that safety checks, copyright checks, any of those elements are kind of done as part of that, right? Before they kind of that response kind of gets sent back. Right? Big search service, as I mentioned, is kind of outside that boundary. Now, I think we've talked about most of these elements, but I just want to kind of reiterate some of those foundational principles, right? So we talked about what responsible AI is. So that's the core set of principles that Microsoft uses to govern any of those responses. Things like fairness, reliability, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. So for example, accountability is I should always be able to track where that response came from, who was responsible for. The security piece, the compliance piece, the privacy piece, whatever permission models are currently in place are placed on Copilot. It's not as if Copilot has a different set of permissions. It can have that if we go ahead and implement them, but from a default perspective, that's the one that kind of works through. From a work perspective, the things that are significant. So your data is your data. Your data, so these are both your prompts and your responses, are not used to train the OpenAI foundational model. They are never used that way. The files that you upload in Copilot, they are stored encrypted and kept for a maximum of 30 days. So if you actually try to access some of those after that, you won't be able to inside Copilot. You'll have to do a re-upload because they are effectively deleted, right? So that, and I get that question around functionality a lot of the times. Microsoft has kind of gone really far in terms of ensuring that the security and privacy piece is secure in terms of everything that is being done, right? Now, what are some of those elements in terms of that security piece that we can kind of go through, right? We can share a copy of this presentation afterwards. Yes, we can. Right? So principles of zero trust. So everything that we're kind of implementing as part of Microsoft Copilot Chat, the recommendation is that the principles of zero trust are applied to it. There are two stages to it, right? So the first piece is I am looking at the web grounded prompts, right? So this is your basic security hygiene. This is everything that you're anything that you kind of prompt Copilot with, that kind of there's a portion of it that can get grounded. So we just want to make sure that all of those elements are kind of secured before they kind of get reached out, and that these are I would say elements like things like conditional access, things like MFA, all of those elements, right? And then the second piece is that you can also use Copilot in Edge. So this is any web pages that you browse, PDFs, Word documents, things like that. How do you kind of place that principles of zero trust to ensure that you are secure around those, right? So and this kind of provides that piece in terms of that figurative piece, right? So again, the simplest configuration, if you're accessing through m365copilot.com, copilot.cloud.microsoft, like, or through the app or the Edge, your prompts can be web grounded. I just want to make sure that that there isn't any issues around that, and so then what you're effectively doing are configuring conditional access. So this is multi-factor authentication, ensuring that the devices that are accessing Copilot are trusted, right? And then from a Microsoft Edge sidebar perspective, Copilot can help you get answers from the web. So if you have it enabled, and there's a group policy setting that you can use to enable or disable it, you can summarize things like PDFs, any other sensitive information, organization information that might be stored in your cloud or your local or locations. You just want to make sure that that in case there is a breach of sorts, that information is not kind of accessible, right? And so these are things like Purview, DLP, your NDM policies, your MAM policies, those need to be in place so that those principles are kind of in place for that, right? And then from a cloud apps perspective, you can use Microsoft Defender from a cloud apps perspective to ensure that that protection is in place, right? So that those zero trust principles are kind of worked through, right? We'll kind of go through the usage and configurations piece. I'll hand it back to Victoria, and then for another awesome video, and then we'll come back and talk about this in greater detail. Over to you, Victoria.
Thanks, Shahab. Okay. So let's touch base on Copilot Chat and how it transforms your everyday work across Microsoft 365. Copilot Chat is an AI-powered assistant that works seamlessly across the apps you use already, like Word, Excel, Outlook, Teams, and PowerPoint. In Word, it helps you draft, rewrite, and summarize content instantly. In Excel, it can help analyze data, generate formulas, and create visualizations, all from one simple prompt. In Outlook, it clears your inbox clutter by summarizing threads and drafting replies. Teams, it can catch you up on missed conversations and meetings. And in PowerPoint, it can build presentations from scratch using just a few bullet points. What's powerful in Copilot Chat is it helps understand your work context, your files, your meetings, emails, and chat, so it delivers answers that are relevant and secure. So let's continue to touch more base on the usage and configurations. Shahab, after you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we kind of talked at the start of the presentation a little bit around like kind of getting a little bit of visibility. Victoria, you'll have to, I think I'll need your help to kind of go through. As you can see, this probably didn't come up in the 25th rehearsal we went through on this. But just we kind of talked a little bit in terms of that Microsoft 365 Copilot chat use and kind of getting that visibility, right? So first and foremost, how do you get that chat usage report? You need to go to your Microsoft Admin Center, you go to reports and usage, and then you kind of select Copilot and then Copilot chat, right? So fairly straightforward. Now, once you come into that usage report, how do you interpret that? Right? So you have the option of viewing that report over the last 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, or 180 days. So that kind of allows you to do a little bit of trend analysis also. It also allows you to look at active users and active average daily active users. The active users elements is also significant in terms of the way Microsoft's kind of tracking that and kind of the funding that they'll have available for your other Copilot initiatives, right? And then you can also look at how Copilot is being accessed, right? So as you're kind of going through the change management adoption exercise, it's always good to know that what are some of the elements that are well known, what are some of the elements that are not well known, right? And so the screenshot there kind of shows you what those app details are, right? So what are the total number of folks who are accessing it? Where are they accessing it from? And so obviously not a lot of people are accessing it from Copilot or Cloud.Microsoft. Maybe that's something that we can put some OCM behind. Lastly, by default, usernames and display names are all anonymous, right? So there is absolutely, by default, there is no way to track who is doing what with Copilot. As admins, though, you do have that ability to remove that anonymization if you need to for any particular usage, right? And that, I would say, is governance exercise that you need to kind of go through, right? So let's move into in terms of providing that organizational access, right? So if I click on that, hopefully it goes to the next one. Yeah. All right. So from an organizational access perspective, the first and foremost thing is that you need to ensure that you list certain IPs. Copilot needs that to access specific network endpoints. There's a list of about 8 or 9 that you need to allow list so that Copilot Chat can work effectively. Microsoft also recommends that you, from ensuring that people have access to Copilot Chat, that you have it pinned to the navigation bar. If it is pinned, it appears in the Copilot Outlook across web, desktop, mobile, all those applications. Right now, it will not show up in your applications like Word, Excel, PowerPoint. If you just have the Copilot Chat, you'll need the M365 Copilot to see it in those applications. Having said that this is changing, so I would say look, kind of watch that space. Copilot Chat by default is actually pinned in web and desktop for if you have the Microsoft 365 Copilot license, right? And then I would say the other element that is important is for you to pin or for you not to pin, the role that you need to have is either global admin or AI admin. If you want more information in terms of the settings and how to kind of do this beyond what I've just explained, you can kind of look at the Copilot control system page in Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Right? Now, in spirit of being practical, what if you want to remove access? You're not ready for it. You're still going through some sort of a pre-work around data security to kind of ensure that you can deploy Copilot Chat even safely. You can go ahead and do that as well, right? And it is slightly complicated, right? So what you can do is if you want to unpin Copilot Chat and block web access, you'll need to go to the Microsoft Admin Center and check that it's not pinned to the navigation bar, right? You can still have users with Microsoft 365 Copilot license access it even if it is not pinned. And then if you want to block access to Copilot Chat for those users also, then you'll have to kind of use a corporate proxy, right? Now, if you're looking to block access for elements like Outlook, you do that. You need to do that through the integrated apps portal in Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And then if you want to make sure that it's not available in the App Store for folks who don't have the Microsoft 365 Copilot, what you need to do is you need to create a user group that has all the users that have the license. And then anyone who does not have the license, you can kind of then ensure that they're not on the list for which specific users group an organization can install is enabled, right? So anyone who is who has a license is part of the user group for which users group in the organization can install. Everyone else is off that user group, and so they won't be able to install it from the App Store. And then if you're looking to kind of ensure that they can't access it through Teams, you'll need to, even if you have not selected it from a do not pin Microsoft 365 Copilot piece in the navigation bar, you still need to ensure that in the app setup policies for Teams, anyone who doesn't have a Microsoft 365 Copilot license can't do this, right? And then for other elements, you can use the policy setting that is mentioned from an edge perspective, right? So it is, again, it's not a straightforward single point of control. If you want to remove access in all of these elements that we've talked about, right? So we've talked about Teams, we've talked about Edge, we've talked about the Copilot Chat applications, right? And so that is, I would say, quite a bit of a lift there, right? We'll go into the user interface elements next. I will hand it back to Victoria to kind of show us, the agents element. I'll hand it back to Victoria to kind of take us through that Copilot Studio piece. I would say this is the space that we're seeing the most traction in. There's a lot of interest. So a lot of users coming into the Copilot Chat ecosystem because of what's happening around the agentic world. I'll hand it back to you, Victoria, to kind of take us through that brief introduction around Copilot Studio, and then we can dig deeper into the admin around and the management around Copilot Studio with and agents with Copilot Chat.
Sounds good. Thanks, Shahab. So let me introduce you to Copilot Studio, your gateway to building custom AI copilots tailored to your business. Copilot Studio is Microsoft's low-coded platform that empowers anyone from IT pros to business users to create, customize, and deploy AI-powered copilots and agents. It's where generative AI meets the flexibility of your enterprise workflow. With Copilot Studio, you can build Copilot agents, an intelligent assistant that automates tasks, answers questions, and connects your data. These agents can be as simple as chatbots that handle FAQs or as advanced that handles a multi-step workflow that pulls from SharePoint, triggers approvals, and sends follow-up emails. What makes it powerful is that it's low-coded or no-coded. You don't need to be a developer. You can use natural language, drag and drop logic, and pre-built connectors to build experiences that work across your Microsoft Teams, web, and mobile. And because it's part of Microsoft's ecosystem, Copilot Studio is secure and governed. You get full control over your access. You get full control over data access, user permissions, and analytics, so you can scale confidently across your organization. In short, Copilot Studio lets you turn your business knowledge into intelligent, secure, and scalable AI solutions. And Shahab will touch base on further details about this.
Awesome, thank you, Victoria. So on the agents piece, I won't go through what agents are and how we work with them. What I want to cover more in detail is in terms of some of the administrative elements, right? Especially around the Copilot Chat piece. So 3 elements: enabling them, authoring them, and then perspective. All of that we're having today is around the declarative agents. Declarative agents are instructional agents, so you kind of go into Copilot Studio and say, hey, Mr. Agent, you are X and your purpose is Y, and you do things in this. So you're kind of providing that instruction, kind of working. Doing custom agents, that is something that is not currently enabled through Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. That is something that is coming down the line, right? So declarative agents, and so we'll talk about that, and maybe actually also half a step back. So declarative agents, you can kind of access them in two different elements. You can access them through Copilot Studio, or you can access them through Agent Builder piece. So when you're kind of interacting with Copilot Chat and you go create an agent, that piece that kind of shows up, that's Agent Builder. Irrespective of where you're kind of working with declarative agents, any that are kind of used based on instructions that you set and based on public websites are available at no additional cost, right? Agents that access shared tenant data, this could be your SharePoint data or anything that kind of gets absorbed into Graph. So emails, Teams, Outlook, anything that requires that piece, they will be built on either your message packs, if you have them, or on a pay-as-you-go model, right? So you want to make sure that you, and the default for this is that they're turned off. You want to make sure that before you turn them on, you are ensuring that all of that security piece that we've talked about, all of that access piece that we've talked about is already in place. You don't want a scenario where there's a bunch of people who are accessing agents and creating agents and using agents that are running up a bill that you are not aware of, right? Because again, like I said, it's a pay-as-you-go model, right? So by default, it is turned off, but you can then turn on from a user-to-user perspective, right? And then as an admin, you can set up that billing plan. You can do it either in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center or the Power Platform Admin Center. But just before enabling them for users, it's imperative that you have that in place if you don't want to get a shock at the end of the month. Right? Now, Copilot Chat users can author agents. Like I said, again, they can do it either both in the Copilot Studio agent builder by create an agent, or they can also do it through Copilot Studio. You will, though, have to give them the maker rights to author agents. Again, by default, that's not something that they'll have, right? And then the access to agents that we talked about, that is all managed and controlled through Microsoft 365 Admin Center. The Copilot Studio piece is the agent management piece is almost like, I would say, a separate piece. So there's the 365 Copilot Chat piece that we've been talking about and how you kind of control and configure them. And that is all in Microsoft 365 Admin Center. But then there's also, I would say, almost a separate governance piece in terms of understanding how you manage Copilot Studio capacity. How do certain people access it? How long they can access it? What are the number of messages? And there's also an inflection point where you go from Copilot Chat to M365 Copilot, because again, remember, for Microsoft 365 Copilot, the limitations around messages are not there. You are not charged for the number of messages in terms of your interaction with agents with Microsoft 365 Copilot. You are almost always charged on that interaction through Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. So if you have certain groups of users that are using a lot of your agents, which is running up a monthly bill, it might actually make more sense for you at some point in time to actually give them the full-blown license, and so that they're not taking away from your message pack or they're not running up a bill from pay-as-you-go model, right? Okay. Now, we've kind of covered, I would say, all of those practical elements that I wanted to kind of cover from a Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat perspective. I did want to kind of talk about a little bit in terms of the CDW's direction around that, right? So we kind of look at it in three different elements based on where you are. So if you're kind of starting off, especially with Copilot Chat, I would say you are in that Copilot plus Power envisioning stage. It is, and I kind of joke about being a Copilot historian. It's interesting to see that evolution, where Copilot Studio was formerly known as Power Virtual Agent. It kind of broke away. But now that Power Platform and Copilot is again coming together, especially around the agents piece, there's a lot that you can do, should do with things like Power Automate and Power Apps, right? So if you're kind of still figuring that piece out, especially around the Copilot Chat piece, you are very much here. Now, what are some of those elements that you should be looking at? So we've talked about a lot of those technical readiness elements. We've talked about the access pieces, but there's a lot more to it. There are things like business value analysis, right? So kind of making a use case in terms of actual value that you will drive from something like 365 Copilot and kind of reporting on it and gaining on that. Discovering scenarios where you can write a business case, where you can see that usage of Copilot. Looking at scenarios for agents, right? And then some of the elements that we discussed, again, it's a 1 hour webinar, we've gone fairly high level, but there's a lot more depth to it, especially if you look at elements like SharePoint Advanced Management and Microsoft Purview to ensure that your security posture is in place before you kind of do a major rollout around Copilot, right? And then we talked a little bit in terms of that control management piece. But again, the settings, especially for agents, are all over the place. They're in the Power Platform Admin Center. They're in the Microsoft Admin Center. They are in your Teams Admin Center. They are part of SAM. They're part of Purview, right? So understanding what are my options in terms of administrating agents, what settings do I need to put in place, and where. All of that Copilot control system is something that we're seeing a lot of that traction with. That's, I would say, something that's part of your route. And then the last piece, I think, so just to give you a frame of reference, CDW has done now upwards of 70 sessions around Copilot training and user training, right? This can be both basic and advanced, but in terms of that adoption piece, it's awesome to have that tool set, but if no one's using it, there is no value there, right? So in terms of that immersion training, adoption, how do you go about that piece? Excuse me. That is also something that we're kind of working towards, right? So for each of those elements, I would say there's that envisioning initial phase. And then once you kind of deploy Copilot to a certain level, you'll understand some of those gaps. And so that's the deployment accelerator piece, right? So you've kind of gone ahead and deployed, and now you identified a few gaps. You want to do something deeper with Purview. You want to look at some sort of a particular end user training for a particular group. All of those elements are part of that deployment accelerator piece. And then the last element is the specialized solutions, right? So these are solutions the CDW develops for customers based on those particular elements. I'll give you a frame of reference. We are working with a bunch of municipalities in terms of creating a bot, agentic bot, to answer questions from their website, right? So this could be things like if you're visiting or if you're a resident, if you want to know what to do this weekend when you visit, or where certain permits exist. For a lot of the smaller municipalities, that service is not 24/7. The phone service is not 24/7. The contact center is not 24/7. Agents are 24/7. So those are some of those specialized solutions that I'm talking about. Automations, things like that. For these first two, there is also, if you kind of invest with Microsoft, there's also certain fundings that are available that will kind of help you along that journey, right? So if you have more questions around it, feel free to kind of reach out to us. I'll leave you with just like I almost look at it as that first roadmap of sorts as you're looking at Copilot Chat. So we kind of talked about it a little bit. So first up, you want to make sure it's available. We talked about how you can pin it to key applications and windows. You want to make sure Copilot Chat is easy to find, both as an app or also in Teams and Outlook, right? The other piece is you want to make it known. Send an email announcement if you have another forum that you use within your organization. Highlight the fact that it is a AI toolset that is made for work, and so that enterprise security piece is built into it, which gives your users the confidence to use it for work data. That is something that is not available with a lot of the consumer-based toolsets out there. And that is a real danger from a work knowledge perspective, right? And announce it that you made available to all what you can do, right? There's a term there in terms of shadow IT. I almost use the term shadow AI, right? And so going back to that first presentation, folks are already using AI. That's not up for debate. You want to make sure that they're not using something that is not mandated by your organization by enabling them a safer alternative. So in terms of if you want to kind of put those firewall rules in place, you want to make sure that that traffic around from that consumer grade third party AI tools is not making its way onto your network. Make sure you do that. And then it is almost a continuous exercise. It's not it won't just be an email and then you'll be done. It is a continuous journey piece, and that's what we kind of talked about, right? So you kind of go through that envisioning, you go through the deployment, but then you'll see that some people will kind of take to it much quicker, some people will be a lot slower, right? So how do you kind of continue that adoption piece? Copilot in the last 18 months or so, from where it started to where it is today, it's night and day. The functionality that we see now is like so different than what was available back in the day, right? And so continuously discovering those use cases where Copilot can add value is something that's an ongoing exercise. That's a recurring exercise. That's not something that you're going to do once and you're like, yeah, it's done, right? So continuously providing that training to your organization. And Microsoft has a bunch of tool sets and a bunch of templates around that adoption exercise that we can use, right? With that, from a content perspective, I think we're very much done. If you have questions that are already in the chat piece, we can take them now. Come to Victoria. If you like this presentation, it was something that I did completely on my own. If you didn't like it, you can email Victoria about it. And I'm sure she can do something about that. Victoria, I'll hand it back to you to kind of close, and I think we've got something similar coming up again, right?
Had to find the unmute button. It is definitely Friday Junior. I don't know about anyone else, but I am ready for our long weekend coming up. Hopefully we have such a great weather. But thank you again so much for joining us today and taking time out of your busy summer schedule to join us for our 1-hour webinar on Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. If you have any questions or concerns, as Shahab mentioned, please put them in the chat or feel free to reach out to me directly or to your account rep. They will circle back with me and I can help point you in any direction that you are looking for. And with that said, we also have another session about AI on AI coming up on August 28th. We will be sending out invites within the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye on your inbox or on our social media for that, and feel free to register. But if we don't have any hands up or any questions, I'm happy to give everyone 9 minutes back to grab another coffee and enjoy the rest of your day.